At Grainger, we're for the ones who specialize in saving the day and for the ones who've mastered the art of keeping business moving. We offer industrial-grade supplies for every industry with same-day pickup and next-day delivery on most orders, all backed by real people ready to help. So you can get the right answers and products right when you need them. Call, clickgrainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
With Blue Link Plus, you can access your Hyundai Tucson Limited remotely. Doors unlocked, temperature set, lost car found.
There it is.
Get complimentary class-leading Blue Link Plus. Call 562-314-4603 for complete details.
Welcome to the Powercat Podcast, GoPowercat.com's Kansas State Athletics Show. Now, here's your host, GoPowercat publisher, Tim Fitzgerald.
Welcome to this GoPowercat Live as we discuss yesterday's Kansas State football loss at Oklahoma State and also take a look around the Big 12 and everything going on. But I've got some topics lined up here to try to get us going as we build an audience here. And let's kind of dive into that. Cole, you were there for us, so let's start with this question. What the hell went wrong with Kansas State?
Well, that's a great question. I think anybody who was watching on TV probably had a lot of the same reactions as any fans who made the trip down from wherever they were to Stillwater, Oklahoma. It was not a pretty game. I think, honestly, this was something that the players did not anticipate happening. To me, that was the biggest thing I took away from talking to them after the game, was just the fact that they were shocked that Oklahoma State really did what they did. I don't think they were expecting Oklahoma State to be as fast as they were. They didn't really talk about that part of it after the game. But Will Howard said we were not expecting them to they didn't show much on film. And so they were a little surprised by not just the defense, but I think the offense as well. To me, the first thing I look at as to what went wrong is I think you have to look at the coaching staff. There were some things that Oklahoma State did schematically that K-State was not prepared for. The first thing that jumps out to me is the RPOs in the first half. K-State just got obliterated with Oklahoma State's RPO game, whether it be because they were playing 10 yards off of the ball or just the fact that they weren't keen on the right reads. Oklahoma State took advantage of some inexperienced linebackers and some inexperienced secondary members, and it was not a pretty sight, especially in the first half.
Wally, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised. I think I tweeted about it during the game did not expect Alan Bowman to be the guy that would beat K-State with his legs. And I mean, early on, those first two drives for Oklahoma State, it seemed like that was, a big part of what Oklahoma State thought they could do. Like Cole was saying with that RPO, did a lot of misdirection stuff where K-State just did not read it right or was, over pursuing in areas that they shouldn't be. I don't know. If you had told me coming into the game that Oklahoma State was going to be without Stribling, even with Jacob Parrish out, I would have told you I would have felt okay, right, with Kansas State. A lot of us figured that it was going to be a little bit more of a dogfight than maybe people thought, just because historically that's how it's been in Stillwater. But the way that it got kind of out of hand, and I know K-State valiantly fought back, to their credit, but to do what Oklahoma State did without Stribling, Fitz, I never saw that coming.
Yeah, it was baffling to me that, look, Wally, you and I talked about the pregame show. This team had talent. They had athletes. They just hadn't put it together, and they were far from not putting it together. They just weren't together. It looked like they didn't even want to be out there on the field together. And for Mike Gundy to kind of reinvent his locker room and get everyone on the same page in a week, it's impressive, because I thought it was over for Mike Gundy at Oklahoma State. It looked like the players weren't buying in, but he got them to buy in. He got them to execute a game plan just good enough to win. I thought Oklahoma State played much better. They just outperformed K-State. They outwanted K-State. It looked like K-State didn't want to be there at times. and yet K-State was, within a score. They could have won that game with a few things that went a little bit differently. But as Chris Kleiman said after the game, they had a chance, but they really didn't deserve to win the game. And I thought that was a pretty telling comment from him. Now,
I think, Fitz, before we move on, I just want to say, I almost think and I know we're going to talk about a lot of stuff as you have the defensive issues pulled up, but I almost think it was almost better that K-State actually lost that game, because if they do win that game, I think a lot of issues that popped up in that game maybe aren't addressed until later in the season, when it actually might bite them more than it did on Friday night. That's just something to think of.
Well, let's move on to topic 2, defensive issues. And did Oklahoma State expose something, Ryan Wallace, about this Kansas State defense, susceptible to those slant patterns? They were playing so soft on the back end. They were getting no pressure up front. Basically, everything we thought we knew about this team went out the window. This defensive unit went out the window. They just didn't play with much enthusiasm throughout this game.
Well, I thought it was interesting early on in the game. Oklahoma State just abused Kansas State in the flat. I think they realized, or they thought they saw something on film heading into the game that they thought they could exploit in terms of K-State's corners and the secondary being able to get off blocks and come up and make tackles, which the cornerbacks have struggled to do so most of the season. And then on top of that, I think they also saw that, without Daniel Green, if we're talking about Romaine and Moore, maybe, I guess in Gundy's brain, even a guy like Purnell, we don't believe that they can get out there quick enough and cover at the sideline. And they were just popping it out in the flats early on. And that seemed to be a real issue. Again, kind of early on in the game, I think K-State ended up settling down and handled things well. But this is just the biggest thing, again, that I feel like I keep coming back to with this defense is the fact that they just are not as patient, I think, as they need to be. That's probably the best way that I can put it. I keep saying over pursue, but they bite on things. They sell out too often. And I guess I'm mainly talking about linebackers and safeties, because I think corners, for the most part, kind of have their assignments. Defensive line has their assignments. But the linebackers, without Daniel Green, I was talking with a former K-State player, messaging back and forth with him a little bit this afternoon on some stuff that I had tweeted out about over pursuit. And he noted that, sometimes, the safeties are being a little bit over aggressive, selling out for things, but also a lot of the times the linebacker play is making the safeties look worse than what it should be, because they're not hitting the right fits, or they're not being patient enough to hit the right fits. They see ball, get ball, and not really playing the patient style to, kind of assess the situation, make a read, then make a play. And so all in all, and I texted with you guys about this, I wonder to some extent if you've got some guys out there, and, again, guys out there that have played football probably understand what I'm talking about here, in the sense that, and Cole, correct me if I'm wrong, but like if you have a guy that you've played with, let's say a Daniel Green, and you're used to playing a certain tempo, because you're kind of like, well, he knows what's going on. Like, I'm going to do this because Daniel's got this. It's hard to reprocess your mind to go, wait, Daniel's not there. I can't play all out and go make this play knowing that Daniel will be in the right spot, because it's not Daniel. And I wonder if there's a lot of that going on right now. They dealt with it a little bit with Jacob Parrish being out last night. And I think they're dealing a little bit with it with Daniel Green, of kind of assuming that guys are going to be doing a certain thing, and then they realize, oh, they're not. And now a misfortune that maybe should have been a 5 or a 6 yard game with Daniel Green in there is now going for a busted play 20 to 30. I wonder a little bit if they're having to kind of reprogram themselves, because this group was already young, guys. I mean, they were already going to have hiccups, but now we're seeing those hiccups like compound themselves, because they were used to guys being there and assuming guys would be there when they're not.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of good points. I think it's got to be reprogrammed in Joe Kleinerman's mind too, because that is a guy in Deuce Green who is going to be in the right spot 99% of the time. He might not make the tackle. He might not make the play. He might whiff on a tackle. He might be late getting there, but he is going to be in the right spot 99% of the time. And so it's less about the type of player you lose in Daniel Green as it is opposed to the consistency of knowing he'll be in the right spot and even lining up. Because, guys, there were times last night where those defensive calls and defensive signals were not coming into the game on time. I specifically can remember a key third down where Austin Moore is still looking at the sideline. They had motioned a running back over to the other side. He was the lone player. I believe it would have been on the right side of the formation, and he just ran in. The running back just kind of ran an up and out route, and Austin Moore was late getting over because he was still trying to set up the defense and communicate with the sideline. So it's that kind of thing that I think they're trying to work through, and that's not something you can work at during the bye week. There's no way to replicate a game situation like that. So yeah, they've definitely taken their lumps there, and honestly, I don't know how you fix that besides maybe trying to make a move at that Mike linebacker position. Maybe you slide an Austin Moore over there. Maybe you permanently say, Jake Clifton, we love having you back up all these different spots, but you're going to be the guy because they can depend on him. I think Austin Romaine has a bright future at K-State. I really do. And he's going to have to play a role on this team, but I just don't know if he's ready for that number one role as being the quarterback of the defense.
Yeah.
We got a lot of questions building up in our chat. We appreciate everyone that's watching right now and all the questions. We're going to go through about 5 topics here, and then we'll dig into some of those questions you have, so there'll be a little bit of overlap, but we'll get to them. I would like to say that it is my understanding that the team met, watched film today, the coaches met, and from what I'm told, butts were chewed because there was such an expectation that this team would go take care of business. That's what the team has done under Chris Kleiman, mostly during non-pandemic seasons, and they did not go take care of business. They looked slow and inefficient and just almost disinterested, which is really troubling to me. But this is also troubling to me. The offense just looked inept. It was in the first half. Will Howard was struggling, and Ryan Wallace, I'm going to come back to you on this, but I think their recruiting issues at receiver have finally come to roost, and I don't think they're good enough at receiver, period, end of story. Keegan Johnson has been a disappointment. I don't know if it's injuries or just not enough fire. They just don't have enough depth there, and we'll get to the quarterbacks in a little bit, and everyone's clamoring for the young guy at quarterback. I'm clamoring for the young guys at receiver. If these dudes can't do it, let's see what some of these young guys have.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I want to say, but it might be just kind of like a bigger picture thing. So I'll save them. In terms of the receivers in general, I mean, I kind of tweeted about it. I did a brief rewatch this morning. First off, by the way, we're 12 minutes in. I should have prefaced this earlier. We've got a little family get together here in Kansas City that trust me, guys, you do not want me to be in a house with better lighting right now because you wouldn't be able to hear me. There's, I think, 6 kids, and they're all under 4 in there, under 5. So, yeah. Anyway, that's why I'm in my car at the moment. But okay.
But your spooky look is very fitting for the topic.
Yes. We're going with the Halloween approach here. Yeah. But here's the thing, guys. Like, Ben Sinnott's a really good player. I mean, I'll be honest in saying, like, there were concerns that I had coming into the year of, like, I know Ben Sinnott is good, but can Ben Sinnott do it now knowing that there's a target on his back? Like, he's not going to come out and surprise anybody in 2023 like he did in 2022. And he's exceeded my expectation. I mean, he's shown that he can be a guy, right, for this offense. But in saying that, like, he's not only just the guy for Will Howard in terms of, like, kind of a safety valve. He's like the lone deep threat that this offense has. And even a guy as talented as Ben Sinnott, it's not good when he is your best deep threat. I mean, he's not Travis Kelce. And even Travis Kelce's not the Chiefs' deep threat. You know what I mean? He's the safety valve. He's the guy. He's the playmaker. But he's not a guy that you want catching a vast majority of your passes beyond 15, 20 yards. And basically, that's what Ben Sinnott's become. I don't know what's going on with Keegan Johnson. Here's what I'm come to the realization of, though, is they've got to push Keegan Johnson because he clearly can be a difference maker for the receivers in terms of the deep ball. I keep referencing some stuff that I tweeted out because I did do kind of a brief rewatch this morning. I want to say Keegan Johnson on passes that are 10 plus yards is like 2 for 3 this year. They've only targeted him 3 times, but he's 2 for 3. And that percentage, other than like Jaden Jackson, is the best of any of the receivers they have. And yet Jaden Jackson has disappeared in deep balls the last 2 games, and they won't target Keegan Johnson beyond 10 yards, really under 10 yards. And so I don't know if this is an injury thing. I've heard he was battling early on with some kind of nagging groin thing. And obviously groin injuries can be something that'll just plague you forever. They're hard to go away, right? But we also heard that he's as healthy as he has been. You can't be the guy that's a superstar in the spring and then completely fall off a cliff in the fall. Like it doesn't make sense to me. So either there's something going on with Keegan Johnson that they just don't feel comfortable with him, or he's not bought in, or he's not trying. End of the day, he's too valuable for them to not try and maximize. They've got to salvage that. They've got to try and use him more because he's clearly, I think, when you talk about one-on-one coverage, one of the few receivers on this roster that can create for himself. So he's worth investing in. Jaden Jackson is worth investing more in. Let Ben Sinnott not be so relied upon to do everything for you. And then getting back to what Fitz said, Trey Spivey, Jace Brown, they've been talking about those guys a heck of a lot since they got on campus. We saw each of them do, I guess it was 1 pass, maybe 2 passes each in the SEMO game. Simplify things. I think too often, if you go back to the Snyder days, it was, well, the receivers can do stuff, but they're not blocking well, or they don't run this pattern well, or they don't do. Okay, then dumb it down for them. Put them in on patterns or schemes that you feel like they can maximize themselves on, and use them in some way, shape, or form, because I think at this point, we're 5 games into the year, we're not seeing it from the other guys. And so at some point, you've got to kind of take the training wheels off, take some lumps, simplify it down, as Chris Kleiman a little bit alluded to in post-game, Cole, and get some of these other guys on the field that can maybe be difference makers, because, we haven't seen it from RJ Garcia outside of SEMO. We haven't seen it from Phillip Brooks outside of, what was it, Troy, maybe Mizzou. They've got to do something. And even beyond the freshman Fitz, how many springs have we heard about how good Xavier Lloyd is? Xavier Lloyd can't see the field. Why? Why? Someone's got to explain to me how you can be so good in the spring. They're really good in the spring and you just don't feel comfortable with them in the fall for whatever reason, or they're really good in the spring because your defensive backs are that bad. And now we have an issue with, okay, well then your defensive backs are the problem as well. So I don't know, guys, but I'll toss it to Cole and saying, to me, if it's me, simple answer is you've got to take less off Ben Sinnott and just, not rely on him to be the only guy that you look for deep. And you've got to start flexing in some of these younger guys.
Yeah. Can I also say, don't throw to backup tight ends. That has become an issue recently. I think Garrett Oakley can be that guy. Obviously, he's only been in the game. He's only played 2 games. But there was a pass last night that went right through the hands of Will Swanson. And unfortunately for Will, I think he might be a few drop balls away from becoming a right tackle. I say that jokingly, but Cole,
Will Swanson should not be having that ball thrown.
Agreed.
Swanson is the blocking of the tight ends. That's his forte, right?
Agreed. I agree. I think that's part of the problem. And I think part of the problem too is there seems to be a way, at least with the running backs, for putting those guys in a position to be successful. Because it seems like Trayshawn Ward and DJ Giddens always seem to find some kind of success. Even when you look down and, DJ ran 15 carries for 75 yards. Pretty good day. He had about that last game. It wasn't spectacular by any means, but Trayshawn Ward, again, over 6 yards a carry, right? Doesn't necessarily seem like he has that good of a day, but the offense picks their spots for those guys. They know when to use DJ. They know when to use Trayshawn. It seems like with the receiver position, they're still trying to figure out when to use who. You mentioned these guys have great springs and then don't show up in the fall. Well, Jaden Jackson wasn't going to see the field. He was going to be Xavier Lloyd. Jaden Jackson was going to be Xavier Lloyd had Keegan Johnson not re-aggravated his hamstring or whatever issue he was dealing with in the beginning part of the year. But instead, he gets hurt, and here comes Jaden Jackson, who, by all means, the staff had no idea possessed this kind of skill. I'm sure they felt like he could be a contributor. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken him. But this is a kid who redshirted as a senior, guys. Like, Jaden Jackson was a redshirt senior last year for K-State, and he comes back and, lo and behold, puts up some plays. But for whatever reason, they take him off the field and decide to use receivers in spots that I just don't feel like are. Why is Phillip Brooks your deep threat? There's no reason that you're throwing a fade ball to Phillip Brooks and he is your second and two shot play guy. That just shouldn't be the case. And I don't know if it's a system thing where the offense and the offensive coaches say, we have a system, we're going to run the system. These are the players we trust in that system, and it doesn't matter, because that was kind of the deal last year. It was Cade Warner is going to play this spot, Malik Knowles is going to play this spot, and if somebody goes out, we still expect that same production. I think you have to cater your offense and get the ball in the hands of the guys who can make plays, and right now, I just don't know if they're doing that.
Fitz, isn't it kind of weird to you? Because to me, when you think about freshmen, right, all the years you've covered K-State, you know, a freshman quarterback, there's a lot for them to pick up right away. Right. You understand why you're not playing a freshman quarterback. A lineman, same thing. Running back even. A lot of running backs in high school aren't asked to block. Receiver doesn't seem like a position that you would think of. There's not some way, shape, or form a freshman couldn't pick it up. We see it at a lot of other schools.
Yeah, I don't understand it either. And maybe it's the fact that they haven't seen the kind of speed and physicality. They're just not used to it. They can't get off the line. They can't get out of breaks. They, and then trying to manage all the different alignments, where they're supposed to be, what they're supposed to do, because it's a lot more complex. But I agree. We saw guys like Tyler Lockett, who, granted, is a special athlete, but he also picked it up, and he went out there and played pretty good football. I'll just say, if the older guys aren't getting it done, give the younger guys a try, at least at that position. And Wally, before we move on, KNet has this question for you, and I love it. How much has that revolving door receiver coach impacted that position? And I think that's a really good question to fit in right here.
I mean, it is. I mean, you can't discount the fact that those guys like a Phillip Brooks has been through, what are we looking at? Jason Ray, Courtney Messingham, Thad Ward, Matthew Middleton now. And then if you even want to go back to the Snyder days, right? You go back to, who was it that last season there?
Andre Coleman.
Was it on? Yeah, it was Andre Coleman. So, I mean, you can't discount that. I mean, no. that definitely has something, because each of those guys teaches a little different technique, wants to see something a little different, out of each route and how you're doing it. So, I mean, that obviously does have something to say in it, but also it doesn't pertain to the guys that we're talking about, like a Trey Spivey or Jace Brown. Mm-hmm. Those guys came in with Matt Middleton. They should be doing everything to Matthew Middleton's liking. And again, I don't want to point the finger at Matthew Middleton either, because some of this could be, above him. But no, I mean, when it comes to a Phillip Brooks, some of the other guys, Seth Porter, those guys that have been through multiple coaches, yes, you're right, K-Ned. You can't discredit that. That does have some sort of influence on, I think, how these guys have performed, not just this year, but, year in and year out.
Okay, here we go. Let's go on to the next topic. I shuffled these around. I got right to this one. It was going to be fifth, but I thought they can't wait. They want to know, why isn't Avery Johnson the starting quarterback? Look, I'm going to start this one. Will Howard has earned his right to have a bad game. Now, my problem isn't that Will's the starter. My problem is that this is the second loss I've seen K-State experience when I thought Avery's running skills could have been better used. At Missouri, they didn't use it often enough. And for the life of me, unless they're still clinging to the hope of a red shirt, Cole Carmody, they didn't even use Avery Johnson in any of that when it was clear the quarterback run was working on Friday night. It was working. They couldn't stop Will Howard. What would they have done with Avery Johnson? And if they adapt their defense to try to stop that, what does that open up? I just felt like they gave him the same looks over and over, and it just didn't work. But Will's the guy. He's going to start next week at Tech. But now I'm wondering, and, Chris Kleiman's hinted now that nobody's sacred, that maybe he's on a shorter leash. And we'll get to the question about who's at fault for some of these turnovers. But Cole, give me your thoughts on the quarterback situation.
Well, I don't think there should be a situation, to be quite frank. There's a lot of fans that were very frustrated with Will Howard's performance, and understandably so. But there's multiple reasons why Chris Kleiman stuck with Will Howard, and Chris Kleiman is going to stick with Will Howard. There was a question asked to him in the postgame about, did you ever think about putting Avery in and giving Avery a try? And he flat out said, yes, we talked about it, but we decided it wasn't a good idea based on some cadences, based on the environment. And I don't necessarily know if I believe that. I don't think this is a redshirt thing. I really don't believe that this is a redshirt and trying to save a redshirt, because Chris Kleiman wants to win football games. And if he believes that Avery Johnson is going to help him win a football game, he'll put him in. On most circumstances, I believe that sometimes maybe it just wasn't in the game plan. It was obvious that the game plan for Missouri was to get Avery involved in the game. I almost wonder if they hadn't practiced that package, if they hadn't given Avery very many reps with the ones during the week, where it sounded like against UCF, Avery got a lot of reps with the ones that week because of Will's health situation. Maybe they wanted to give some more reps back to Will during the bye week to try and get him back into shape. Nonetheless, this is not a situation of trying to save a red shirt. If Avery Johnson can help, he needs to help. But I went through guys, and I want to just kind of give the folks examples of the top 10 quarterbacks, 24/7's composite rankings. Okay. And I just want to give an update on where these 10 quarterbacks are now, a third of the way through the college football season, so fans can get an idea and compare your 4-star quarterback with the rest of the 5- and 4-star quarterbacks in the country.
Hit me, Cole.
Okay. We'll start with number 1. That's the Grand Arch Manning, who has yet to throw a pass or appear in a game for Texas. Probably the 3rd-string quarterback. They have a very good quarterback room. There's no doubt about it. The number 2 quarterback, Nico Ilamaveo. Did I get that right, Wally?
Yeah. I don't know.
Tennessee, okay? He has appeared in some games, much like Avery. No significant snaps, mop-up duty. Backup quarterback at Tennessee. Number 3, Dante Moore. This is your first quarterback who has played significant time. He has played well. There's no doubt about it. But he has about a 50% completion rate. He is a starting quarterback at UCLA. There's been some growing pains. UCLA has found their guy, Dante Moore. It's a guy who is going to have a really bright future. He is one quarterback, and the only quarterback on this list, by the way, who has played significant snaps. Number 4 is Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. Again, mop-up duty against Arkansas State. Number 5, Malachi Nelson at USC, obviously backing up Caleb Williams. Same situation there. Number 6, Christopher Vivenzina of Clemson. People have talked about Clemson's quarterback situation, but Christopher has yet to play significant snaps for the Tigers. Number 7, Jaden Rashada. And this is the quarterback that I think K-State fans can look at and say, this is what happens when you throw a quarterback into a situation who's not ready to be. Not only did Jaden Rashada suffer an injury that's going to cost him 4 to 6 weeks, but he was not good at all for Arizona State in the beginning part of the season. He won't probably play the rest of the season. Looks like Arizona State's found their guy at the quarterback spot. But that was a guy, as a true freshman, who was thrust into a situation, not a very good situation, in Tempe, and did not play well at all. You look at Eli Holston, another backup, and then you get down to Avery Johnson. And behind Avery Johnson is a guy by the name of J.J. Cole at Iowa State, who, once again, is not good enough to be the starting quarterback at Iowa State. So those are the top 10 quarterbacks in this class. Avery Johnson is number 9. Can Avery Johnson be better than a lot of these quarterbacks? I think the answer to that question is yes. Is he ready? Just based off of this list, I think the answer is no.
Ryan Wallace, give me your thoughts on how they should be using Avery Johnson.
Well, I mean, I was at a watch party last night, with family and stuff. And I mean, the same things were coming up in the room as what was transpiring on Twitter, which was, Avery should be in the game. Where's Avery? Look, I'm as big an Avery fan as there is. What do they call it? A stan, right, Cole?
Yeah.
Avery
Yes.
stan.
Yes.
We're so hip.
As Cole said, this first off, this is a thing it's not just to the K-State fan base, but I mean, this has been every year. I mean, I can remember moments when fans wanted Sammy Lemur to come in. I can remember times when, they wanted Alex Delton to come in, and then it was Skylar Thompson. There's always the clamoring for the backup in games when the starters don't play well. But I think you also have to look at it from Chris Kleiman and Colin Klein's perspective, and you have to think about if we were to straight pull Will Howard in a situation where he's struggling. I mean, he struggled last night. The message that it sends to Will Howard, that, mentally, what does it do? I mean, you've got to, if you're going to preach that this is your guy all year, he's got to be your guy even in tough situations. Now, in saying that, here's where I do agree with Fitz in the sense that if your offense is struggling to the point that it did last night, and the one thing that is working on offense is your ground game, why the hell isn't Avery Johnson being sprinkled in some way, shape, or form? It gets Will Howard off the field for a minute. Maybe somebody can chat with him while Avery's taking out, another play, and they can start to go through the plan of, okay, Will, when you go back in, here's what we hope is going to happen. There were ways that you could have sprinkled in Avery last night that would have worked. And Fitz, I'll finish by also saying this. I wasn't a huge fan of the comment of, well, this is a tough environment to bring Avery into. Because if you go back and you even listen to some of the things that Chris Kleiman and the staff praised Avery Johnson for at signing day, it's his competitive nature. The kid would rather be on the field in that type of game, when everything is on the line, high stress, high anxiety. That's the type of stuff I've witnessed this kid live for. He loves it. And at the same time, Fitz, nobody's going to mature by only bringing them in, at some game against SEMO and, maybe a road game here at Missouri State, or something like that. At some point, he has to be thrown into the fire. Right. But I'll finish by just saying, I don't know if last night was the night to throw him into the fire, but yes, he should have been sprinkled in more than he was, which was 0.
Well, I personally don't understand this. You ran the series of plays at Missouri, so it's been prepped that left Will Howard on the field. There's only one reason to leave Will Howard on the field as a receiver is you've got things that build off the basic formation of Avery running a zone read. That obviously the plan was to put something on film that Will Howard's out here. We could do a throwback to him. We could do something else with him. If you prepped that a couple games ago, well, you're in a desperate situation here to get some offense. I didn't understand why they didn't try something like that. On to the fifth topic before we take on some of these questions. Turnovers, big issue. Will Howard, 3 interceptions. It plays right into what we were just talking about with Will Howard. It was as bad a performance as I've seen from him since his sophomore season. He gave nothing like that last year. Even at West Virginia when he wasn't great, or Alabama when he had some turnovers, he still played at a pretty high level. He never really played at a high level other than that long run. But this isn't just an offensive problem. Chris Kleiman was really pointing this out quite a bit in the postgame. They're not creating turnovers as a defense. They're getting absolutely whooped in the turnover category right now. And Wally, it's a big issue. I don't know how you magically create turnovers, but I'll say this. I don't think the defense is aggressive enough. I don't think they're hitting enough. I don't think they understand their assignments well enough to play with the kind of aggression you need to create turnovers, and it's really added up.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff on offense, was bad last night. Those were throws. Even going back this morning, I was like, maybe they weren't as bad throws as I thought. No, they were pretty bad throws. But again, Will Howard has shown that, he's going to gamble a little bit, and that's what, again, you flash back to a year ago, and that's what everybody loved about Will Howard was he was the quarterback that was willing to chuck it downfield and let the chips fall where they may. And last year they came up right. And this year there have been too many that have come up wrong. But in saying that, I I tend to think that the defense not being able to create is going to become a bigger issue down the stretch. I think that will turn it around. Like, is he going to be perfect? Is he not? I don't think he's going to be a turnover machine. Like, that's the best way I can describe it. I think he'll figure it out. It won't be as bad as it was last night. But this defense, like Fitz was saying, Cole, oh boy, here we go. I'm dark. Let's turn the car on here. There we go. But Cole, here's the other thing. Oh my goodness. The defense is not aggressive enough. And I don't know if it's something that needs to start from the defensive line. They're not being able to pressure. It seems like Joe Klanderman's having to manufacture some stuff a little bit more than he did last year without a Felix. They're not stripping the ball. I can't tell you guys how many times, and this is beyond last night, guys are playing pretty good coverage, right? And like the hands there, but they don't find the ball, or it just goes. I don't know. I don't know if it's a technique thing that they need to go back to the drawing board with, Cole, but to me, again, I think the offensive turnovers.
The defense kind of gets away with it because that seems to be an issue.
Now you're on your card speaker, I think.
I'm here.
Okay,
I'm here.
There we go.
Okay,
hey, Cole.
Anyway, Cole, what I was going to say to you is I think it's easier to remember the bad takeaways on offense because you're witnessing the ball going away. Whereas if the defense doesn't generate a turnover, you kind of forget about it, but it's still a bad thing because they're not generating turnovers.
They're not generating turnovers. I think that is bigger than the interceptions because, quite honestly, last year, what did people want? People were mad at Adrian Martinez because he would chuck the ball down the field for 5 yards, check the ball down for 5 yards. You're right. Will decides, I'm going to throw it down the field, and sometimes it gets intercepted. Well, if you have a defense that can kind of create turnovers, if you lose the turnover battle 2-1, that's a lot bigger than losing the turnover battle 2-0. I mean, that's a huge deal. And so you can live with losing the turnover battle by 1, but if you lose by more than 1, then it starts to get dangerous, just solely based on math and possessions. But the defense, I'm of the opinion, and after watching some of those guys, especially a guy like Justice James, a guy like Keenan Garber, who just hasn't played at this level, they have confidence and they know that they can do things. But until they see it happen for them live and in a game setting, it's going to take some time. I think we've seen Jacob Parrish develop into the corner to where he is able to play with that confidence. If the ball's thrown his way, he's going to be able to make a play and he might be able to intercept it. I think Will Lee is getting to that point, not there just yet. But besides that, even VJ Payne, I think, is still kind of in that mindset. They have to see, it's like a basketball player, Fitz. Once the ball goes through the net, it gets a whole heck of a lot easier to be able to repeat that. I think defensively, still working on it. And let's not talk about the fact that the defensive line and the pressure on the quarterback has just not been there this year. Nate Matlack is a guy that I think everybody's been waiting to just come alive, but he can't even seem to get on the field that often. Brendan Mott has been solid, super solid in the run game, and the run game as a whole, defending the run game as a whole has been great. But they have really yet to be able to rush the passer with just 3 and really just 4. So they're going to have to find ways, whether it be stunts, whether it be bringing corner blitzes. We haven't seen hardly any of that. Find a way to manufacture pressure until you can get better on the defensive line, because I think that's a root of the problem right now.
Can I just say one more thing, Fitz, that I just thought of as with what Cole was kind of alluding to there is where the heck are the safeties? This was an issue for me coming into last year. Drake Cheatham, Josh Hayes, those guys exceeded my expectations. Sincere Mason even. This year, it was kind of, again, like, well, what kind of Kobe Savage are we going to see? Is VJ Payne ready? What is Marquise Siegel? Those guys aren't the ball hawks that we've seen the last 2 years. And I wonder a little bit, guys, if it's, they've now flipped VJ Payne and Kobe Savage. Chris Kleiman alluded to that in the Tuesday media availability. I wonder if there's still too much processing for a lot of those guys that we haven't seen them jump a pass yet. We haven't seen them come up because I think they're still busy accounting for Daniel Green not being there, there's a lot of processing right now, I think, going into the safeties. And over the last several years, Fitz, that has been a position group that has been the catalyst for turnovers. And we're not seeing it from this safety group.
Yep, I agree with that. You're listening to GoPowercat Live. I hope you're enjoying the in-depth analysis from our Cole Carmody, who was in Stillwater for the game, and our Ryan Wallace, who has snuck out of a family reunion or something to sit in his car.
This is terrible, guys.
No, it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's live. It's fantastic. Make sure you're hitting the like button. Try to get this out there to more people. Leave some comments. We've got a lot of comments, and after this really brief break, we're going to park a break right here. We'll get to some of those questions. And if you're watching live, don't go anywhere, because this break lasts about 4 seconds as we park a spot for our audio breaks and our replay break here on YouTube.
GoPowercat.com's Powercat Podcast continues after this short break.
The NFL regular season is wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there are so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. Find bets in the new Explore tab. Make a parlay in the Parlay Hub, the best way to find popular parlays, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/247 and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Must be 21 plus and present in Arizona, Colorado, Connecticut, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kansas, Kentucky, Louisiana, permitted parishes only, Massachusetts, Maryland, Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, or Wyoming. FanDuel is offering online sports wagering in Kansas under an agreement with Kansas Star Casino, LLC. First online real money wager only. $10 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire 7 days after receipt. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG in Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342 in Arizona, 1-888-789-7777, or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut, 1-800-9-WITH-IT in Indiana, 1-800-522-4700, or visit ksgamblinghelp.com in Kansas, 1-877-770-STOP in Louisiana. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net in West Virginia, or call 1-800-522-4700 in Wyoming. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, or visit oasas.ny.gov/gambling. Standard text messaging rates apply. Sports betting is void in Georgia, Hawaii, Utah, and other states where prohibited.
Welcome back to the Powercat Podcast.
Okay, boys, let's get to some questions here in the chat. Of course, it went all the way back to the top on me, so I lost where I was at. Let me see. Let's get to this one. Another one from KNED. Was Deuce that special? Is this a not having Deuce, not having that kind of security blanket? You know he's going to get something for you, or is it just kind of losing our way as an offense, losing their way, and they can't quite find what they want to do?
I'll take this question first. I think with Deuce Vaughn, you had a guy who could, I'm going to make it related to baseball terms here. He was a guy who could get on base at a very high percentage. In other words, he would be able to get 3 and 4 yard runs. But because of his size, I think it limited his ability to maybe get those 5 and 6 yard runs consistently, like we've seen DJ Giddens able to do. DJ Giddens doesn't have that breakaway speed to where he's able to just get by somebody and then not get caught. He can, and depending on where the field is, DJ Giddens is more that guy. Deuce Vaughn would hit 265 and hit for 35 to 40 home runs a year. And DJ Giddens is going to be a guy who hits 290 and hits 15 home runs per year. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have that burst and that breakaway speed, but he's able to consistently get you yards. I think Trayshawn Ward, they're still kind of trying to figure out what role. I personally would like to see a little bit more Trayshawn in the next week's game. But
yes.
I don't necessarily think this is a Deuce problem. Maybe more so in the passing game, Wally. Like if you're looking at one spot where they really miss Deuce, it's being able to say this linebacker cannot guard this running back in the passing game. Other than that, I think running the ball, it hasn't been that big of an issue.
Simple answer, guys, is that it hasn't been that big of an issue in the running game. It's the passing game, and not just with Deuce having really good hands and being a pretty dang good receiver, but it's the ability that Colin Klein had to create mismatches. When you flex Deuce out of the backfield into the slot, what it made a defense do and how they adjusted created other things on the opposite side of the field or in a different area. They don't have that ability right now because the two running backs that they do have don't possess the kind of threat. And if they do, we haven't seen them create that kind of threat. So therefore it hasn't created a lot of adjustments on the defensive side for the opponents.
Okay. Here's one from John Norton, kind of back to the interception issue. Ryan Wallace, bad passing or was it bad route running? I think it was both. We still don't know between Phillip Brooks if he ran the wrong route or Will threw the wrong route. But I want to point out, these are veteran players that have played together. How are they not on the same page? That was my trouble. Whether it was one or the other's fault, why is there fault here? They should be on the same page.
That one was a head scratcher. Because like we were all texting each other like, that's what, a 5th year to a 6th year?
Yeah.
Like, how are they not like it? Sometimes it's easy to be like, well, we'll probably side with this guy over that guy. And like, I don't know who was in the wrong on that one. Judging by the pass or the way that the confidence that Phillip Brooks showed to get upfield makes me think that if I had to choose gun to the head, maybe Phillip was the one that was maybe in the right. But I don't know. I mean, Will Howard seems to know the playbook pretty well, Cole. So I don't know. I will say that beyond Friday night, we've seen some issues in the past already this season with guys maybe not, again, say there's a route that needs to find the sticks, being short of the sticks. So there is some route running issues. As far as last night goes, I'm with Fitz, Cole. Probably a combination of both.
Yeah, particularly in that pass. And we'll ask Will Howard about that pick six. Will described it in a way that I made it sound like, at least for me personally, he didn't want to throw his teammate under the bus. So I actually maybe tend to side with Will. Yeah, and think that might have been on Phillip. But again, it's kind of a moot point, right? Again, These are old veteran players. It shouldn't be happening. I'm also of the opinion, though, I feel like sometimes the receivers get a little bit lackadaisical with when knowing the ball is not supposed to be thrown their way. And so there are instances where you're supposed to run a streak as fast as you can to try and clear out that safety to open up the underneath. And sometimes I feel like maybe that doesn't happen. And it might not be a big impact on that particular play, but because a lot of these guys have not experienced, take Phillip Brooks out of this, a lot of these guys have not experienced the level that Colin Klein and this offense needs and expects. Maybe there's still some trying to figure out just how hard they have to play. I'm sure they think they're playing hard, and I'm sure they want to. I know they want to play hard. I know they try, but I still think that there is sometimes a little bit of, okay, what do they need to do to be successful? And I think that starts with the coaching and works its way down. But there is somebody that eventually does have to take command of that room, does have to take command of that offense and say, no, that's not how you do it. This is how you do it. I'm going to show you how to do it, and this is going to change. And if that doesn't happen, then we're going to be sitting here talking about this the whole year. Somebody has to do something. Somebody has to say something in order to make sure that the offense can start to generate some points.
Okay, next question. There seems to be a lot of questionable coaching decisions throughout this season that haven't been the norm from Ryan Coots. Look, I think they actually have been the norm in some ways, and I don't mean that as an outright insult here. I've said this over and over. Chris Kleiman doesn't have a lot of experience in coaching from behind. He never did it at North Dakota State. And how to manage timeouts as the clock's going down. I just think it's an area where he needs to be conscious that maybe he needs someone to kind of help him manage things a little bit with how to use timeouts, where to, I just see him do some things. And also, he talked a lot about that 2-point conversion when they're down by 14, trying to get it to put pressure on the offense so that they'd be down or up 6 and kind of panic. So I understand that's the analytics. They focused on the analytics with that. And I said this last night, Wally, on the very short post-game podcast, because we didn't really want to talk much about the game last night. If you're going to buy into analytics and buy into them, and that means defer, you don't take the ball. That's the most basic analytics. You're worried about 4 over 4. We'll solve that by deferring, so you get the ball to start the second half. You don't have the opportunity for the opponent to have back-to-back possessions over halftime if you let them have the ball. But typically it's a team that has more confidence in the offense and defense that does this.
Yeah.
And I think he is unintentionally sending a message to the defense he doesn't trust them to get a stop.
Yeah.
But we need to get a lead. And I think there's a mental toll with that coach doesn't think we can get him a stop here. They got to go back to deferring if they win the toss. I'm a strong believer in that. And again, that's what the analytics say. And you want to buy into the analytics in some areas, buy in all the way.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of surprised that when I went online kind of after the game to see the pushback against going for 2, because in the moment, I didn't question it one bit. I just thought that's what I would do right here. So I was a little surprised at that. I guess my thing goes back, and it's not even like a Kleiman staff or any staff. I just think overall, too often in the college game, you have guys that are kind of too stuck and stubborn on the weekly game plan and not wanting to avert from it. That, well, this is what we saw enough of this on tape, and like eventually it's going to work, or we need to run this so that it sets this up later. And it might not be working. Like at some point you got to you don't have to throw the towel in, but you got to say, okay, right. We need to stay in this game. And the longer that I kind of keep going back to what I thought was going to work that isn't working is pushing us further and further away. I just like in general, whether it's K-State, anybody, to be able to kind of close what they thought was going to work and go back to trying some things out and figure out what's going to work on the fly.
I think offensively, Fitz, that's Wally, you mentioned, I think offensively, that's really where that needs to happen. Yeah. I do, though. I agree. I thought going for 2, I love that decision. I actually also thought going for it. I know that when they went for it in their own down 11, I think at one point, it would have been in the third quarter, late third quarter, early fourth quarter, when they went for it and ended up not getting it. They held them to a field goal, and it was a 14-point game. And then I think that's when they went down and scored. I actually didn't mind that either. I think the fact that Chris Kleiman is an aggressive coach, K-State, they have to play aggressive. They really do.
Okay, here's another question from JMR. Instead of developing young players on a bye week, how about working the starters hard to get them ready? Overwhelming sense of complacency last night. Amen. And Wally, you're the one who's pointed this out. Chris Kleiman isn't good after off weeks. And I think it's just plain flat out now time to say, do something different. Because what you're doing isn't working. That team was not prepared to play, and they haven't been prepared to play after a lot of off weeks. It was something Bill Snyder was known to be good at. I don't know if he was really that good about it, but I do think that Chris Kleiman, this is an area that he personally needs to work on. Whatever they're doing in the off week, it ain't working. I think he gave them too much rope, too much off time to rest. And they just look like they were ill-prepared and not motivated. And after an off week, I think that's awful.
Well, I mean, I will disagree to some extent in terms of like not the idea of them focusing too much on guys that aren't playing, because if that were the case, then how did Jacob Parrish not get injured during the week? He's your starting cornerback. So, I mean, that they were clearly working some of the older guys during the week. I just think somewhere along the way, there's maybe not enough self-scouting that needs to be happening, is what Fitz was saying. Because again, you've got a guy like Mike Gundy that I think early on in his career, I think overall he's like, I want to say he's had 7 losses after bye weeks, but like 4 of them were in like his first 3 or 4 years. Like since then, I think he's 13-3 after a bye week. And Chris Kleiman at K-State is now, what do we say, 1-3 outside of the COVID year, which we're throwing that out because there were weird, breaks all over the place. Yeah. Self-scouting, something's got to be off. I mean, you don't go 1-3 and have the success record that Chris Kleiman has and have the success that Kansas State had last year. Clearly, the program's taking the right trajectory. To have that kind of hiccup on bye weeks is just out of the norm, Cole. I don't get it.
No, it's weird. And it really felt like, again, they were surprised. And I think that's where your disappointment, if you're a K-State fan, comes in, is because, you felt like, oh, hey, my team's coming out of a bye week, going into an inferior opponent. Surely they'll be prepared. And it felt like they weren't prepared. And when they weren't prepared, they were surprised at the stuff that Oklahoma State was throwing at them. So, yeah, I do. I think it's time to kind of maybe move away from not necessarily develop your young guys, because I think that's really important. Maybe you can still coach with your young guys and have some more things catered towards them. But it's the middle of the season. As Will Howard said, if they have championship aspirations, you need to focus on the guys that will help you get there.
Yep, I agree. Okay, Coop has a really interesting one. Was the O-line schooled? I was really disappointed in the offensive line play. I just thought they weren't very aggressive, very crisp. They ended up shuffling guys. I thought they'd be settled at the offensive line. They looked more unsettled in this game than they have all year. Cole, you're a former offensive lineman, sort of. It's too small, buddy. But that's what ended the career, right?
Yes.
But it was disappointing. They should have been better, and they weren't. They just weren't very good.
Well, I thought it was odd that Carver Willis started at right tackle. He was listed as the backup in the depth chart, starts at right tackle. He's even in there on the last drive. Yep. Credit to Carver Willis. He actually played a lot better than he has in the past. And maybe that's one of those guys who they're starting to bring along and they like where he's at. Maybe that has more to do with Christian Duffy not being fully healthy. I don't know. But at this point, I think it's pretty obvious. You have to go with your veterans. And that means KT Leviston at left guard. That means KT Leviston left tackle, Cooper Beebe at left guard, Hayden Gillum at center, Taylor Potier at right guard, and Christian Duffy at right tackle. Those are the guys who have been here the longest. That's the group of offensive linemen that, if you guys recall, they were the best as far as run blocking goes. There definitely was some holes on pass protection, but I mean, that group was really starting to figure it out offensively, running the football. You got to go with those veterans. I know that's the philosophy, but you have to go with the veterans. I just am fully on board with that. Go with the veterans. And at some point, if they need to be replaced, then they need to be replaced permanently. I just don't like we're going to throw this guy for one series, this guy for two, and then the other guy for two, and this guy for one. I just don't know if it works, guys.
I was surprised, guys, when I went back this morning on PFF at the difference between snap counts in Hadley Panzer and TP, because I thought TP played really good last night and was very limited. It was like 22 snaps for him. And if you go back, I mean, Hadley really struggled early on in that game. The first two series were atrocious. But let me slide this in here, Fitz, because if you remember almost an hour ago when we started and there was a pause, it was about the receiver question. I said, well, I'll save it. It's kind of a bigger issue deal. I'm going to slide it in here because I think it makes sense. And I don't know if another question will touch on it. I think one of the issues, big topic issues right now facing Kansas State staff is I think they're stuck between a rock and a hard place on having a lot of different positions and a lot of different veterans that they've put faith in that to this point have put it on the field. They know what they can do, and yet they're not delivering. And they're stuck between sticking with that veteran, and because those guys know how it's done, we know that they know how to do it. We've seen them do it, even though they're not really playing good, and going to a younger guy that's gonna make some mistakes. And it's like, well, right now we're just trying to win. This younger guy might provide something a little bit better, but we don't know if we really want to deal with the headaches. I see it at a number of different positions, Fitz, this back and forth where you can make an argument either way. And it's like K-State staff just seems to be stuck. I do not envy them right now. There's a couple of areas where I'm like, yeah, go with the younger guy. And then I know come that next Saturday, I'd be going, good Lord, this kid looks young. Like, what's he doing? And the staff would be going, we told you. But honestly, guys, I think there are a number of positions where they have to be scratching their heads going, what's the better route to take right here?
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And I think that's something that's going on up in Veneer where they're trying to sort all of that out. Okay, I promise we're going to talk about some more college football, not just K-State. We got pretty deep into the Wildcats. Good stuff. First, anyone else surprised by Oklahoma? How good they were?
Yes.
They were really good, guys. Really,
yes.
That looked like old Oklahoma. Coach Venables made some changes. I wasn't sold. They played nobody in that non-conference. Again, they lost Georgia. I get all that. But then they had Cincinnati and Iowa State. Wasn't overwhelmed by them in either one of those games against pretty bad opponents. And then they played Texas and they looked pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah. And what's interesting about it is if you want to still talk about if K-State gets their crap together, that actually worked out better because now you still, if you want to be the ultimate optimist, K-State still owns its own fate in its hands. You win out, you're going to play Oklahoma or someone in the Big 12 championship. But that means winning in Austin when you couldn't win in Stillwater. You got to win in Lubbock next week. Cole, your thoughts on that OU Texas game?
I thought it was an amazing game.
It was a great game.
Zach and I were in the car coming home, listening to it on the radio. I got a chance to watch the second half. I thought OU looked really good, but again, it never ceases to amaze me how Texas just continuously decides to just not show up at times. I mean, you want to talk about Red River, and I understand it is a completely different story, but Quinn Ewers was not good in the first half. I understand he was better in the second half. He was really good in the second half, but he was not good in the first half. And when you lose by 4 points, one half, it makes a big deal of football. There's a big difference. And so you're nitpicking, yes, but for a team that went on the road and beat Alabama, and I understand Alabama is not the Alabama of old, but for a team that was ranked number 3 in the country, for a team that people think can compete for a national championship, I think it's pretty clear Texas is just not there yet. And it wouldn't shock me if Texas loses another game in the regular season. It wouldn't shock me if they lose 2 games in the regular season. They get BYU coming into Austin. That game is coming up on the schedule. That they get an off week in between there, and then they play K-State. I'm going to say right now that I think they will either lose to BYU or to K-State. I don't know who they're going to lose to, but they will drop one of those home games because I just feel like at times Texas gets bored. And they got bored against Kansas, and they coasted at the end of the game. But that's just kind of who Texas is. We've seen it. It's right in front of our face. At what point are we going to acknowledge Texas is not a national championship contending team? Can we admit that? They might be this year because I don't think there is an obvious great team. Ohio State struggled today. We've seen Alabama struggle. We've seen Georgia struggle. I think the NIL and the transfer portal has evened things out. I think it's going to be very chaotic, which is in favor of the brand names. If a bunch of teams have 1 or 2 losses, the brand names all get in. That's just how it works. Around the Big 12 right now, as we got a couple games going on, Texas Tech is leading Baylor 14-3. The Bears just kicked a field goal. About 9.5 to go in the second, and TCU and Iowa State are tied at 7 in Ames. 6:48 to go in the second. Okay, next game, Kansas, fellas. I knew Kansas would run right through that defense, and I knew that playing Jason Bean really didn't have an effect. Maybe it was even a positive because it brought the option game fully into the game plan. It meant they were going to run the ball. My God, UCF. You cannot tackle, and they've had a ton of injuries in the front part of their defense. I get all that. They're out of alignment. They don't wrap up. They just let 3 KU running backs just churn them up all day long in what was a butt kicking that the score doesn't reflect. Wally, KU's good, and I've been saying it since the start of the year. They did this without Daniels at quarterback. This is a good team. This is a legitimate threat to be a contender for the Big 12 championship.
Yeah, I mean, I think their defense is better than it gets credit for. It's not great, but I mean, like they're making huge strides there. And then offensively, I mean, you're right, Fitz. I think Daniels is a difference maker. There's no doubt.
Yep.
But Bean is capable, and beyond that, Colton Nicky's really freaking good. I mean, the guy can just X and O with the best of them. He figures out ways to attack opponents and it hurts them. And then with UCF, I mean, I expected a little bit more from their offense today. And again, that's in saying like KU's defense, I think, is better than people think it is. But to get John Rice Plumlee back and still struggle the way that they did, I didn't expect that. Expected it from their defense. They got a first-year defensive coordinator. That might not last long, guys. But I expected a little bit more from the Knights on offense.
Cole?
Yeah, I'm in this tough place with Kansas because I want to believe that they are a legitimate contender for going to Arlington. But then when you look at the schedule and see that they have to play Oklahoma and Texas, it maybe makes that a little bit hard to believe. I don't know if obviously they already lost to Texas. The team that I saw today play Texas and Oklahoma, I don't know if that team loses, even if that game is in Lawrence. I don't think they lose that game. And so that already puts Kansas at 2 losses. Can a 2-loss Kansas get into the Big 12 championship game? Potentially, but then there's that 14 straight game streak that they have to some other team down the road that they haven't beaten in 14 years. Somebody told me about it. I'm not too sure about that. I don't know about that game yet. I still think K-State has probably a good chance to win that game. There's a lot of things that go into it. We'll talk about it at length. KU is good. They are good.
Yep.
I think they are not at that level just yet, especially because of the teams that they still have to play.
I would agree. I guess my final thought as we wrap this live up here is, Evan, I think you might be overreacting a little bit. Look, I know KU's good, but that's a long ways down the road. And I know it was a tongue-in-cheek comment, but that's pretty funny. KU's good. And that's good for K-State because that will bring some real worth to those last 3 games. If they can start rolling again and get their, together, that game will have a lot of value. But it's easy for every fan, and every fan base does it. They overreact to a win or a loss. And this one was as bad as I've seen for Kansas State outside that pandemic season. I think this team's going to be okay, but it's going to come down to these leaders. These captains have to take control. The coaches have to be better, and that includes on special teams where they're just not special. They're kind of below average right now. And I do wonder about uncertainty with extra points and field goals, if that actually played a role in some of the decision-making of going forward on 4th and long when you could have kicked a field goal. I disagreed with that, but maybe they didn't have faith. And maybe that 2-point conversion was in part because what if we miss this extra point? And then it just looks awful. But I don't know, guys. I was upset last night, but I think I've just been around this long enough to know next week Kansas State could be really good. It's just what happens in college football when you're dealing with a bunch of kids. Oklahoma State just showed exactly that.
I'll say this, guys, and I said it on our pregame show, Fitz. And it sounds crazy to stick by this now, but I think I'm going to. I said we would learn more. We're going to figure out more about Oklahoma State last night than we would K-State. Win or lose, we would figure out more about Oklahoma State than K-State. And I still stand by that. I think we figured out that Oklahoma State can still do some things. They've still got some dudes on both sides of the ball. They're just trying to figure out some things this year, right? And they figured some things out on a night against Kansas State. But then you've got Kansas State, and as we've said, history has shown that they haven't been great out of bye weeks, so that really wasn't a shocker. There were just a lot of things that I think, don't get me wrong, Kansas State's still figuring themselves out. But the fact that they made it a game there at the end, in a game that really wasn't a game, also proves to me that the K-State culture is still pretty strong with Chris Kleiman. Like, these guys still have full belief. They'll go back. They'll correct some things. Look, it's a big test coming up in Lubbock. Another big test after that to come home and play TCU. These are back-to-back games that are going to prove a lot about Kansas State. But at the same time, I'm not completely off the bandwagon, Cole, after one night. Because, again, it was a really rough night. But I think you still see a lot of things that are positive in what Chris Kleiman's built. And it's just a matter of guys being a little bit more assignment sound here and there and figuring some things out. The pieces are still in place.
They are. And you know what? I'll take that a step further. Go back to the Missouri game. The kicker drills a 61-yard field goal. Today, he came up short on a 44-yard field goal going into the same direction against LSU. So if that just doesn't tell you what fate is right there. I need to see it again. If K-State has another bad performance next week in Lubbock, I will be, yes, this is a team that's going to be 7-5 or 8-4. And maybe I'm crazy for saying that I still believe that this team their goals are right in front of them. If they win in Lubbock, you got to feel really confident that they'll be able to at least win the rest of those games and give yourself a chance to go down to Austin and do something special. I just refuse to doubt Chris Kleiman. History shows, and I wrote this down in my notes, but last year, K-State, after a loss, we all know they went on the road after the Tulane loss and beat Oklahoma. After a loss, they then beat Oklahoma State 48-0. After a loss, they then beat Baylor by 28 points. So I don't know what the spread will be next week in Lubbock, but I feel very confident that K-State will take care of business next week against the Red Raiders.
Well, I agree with you. Every week is self-contained in the Big 12. You can't take anything for granted. K-State has learned that hard lesson once again. Everyone can beat everyone on the right Saturday. K-State was on the bad end of that at Oklahoma State. Maybe Oklahoma State is picking it up and they'll rediscover themselves. I guess we'll find out more down the line. Kansas State at Tech. Our coverage will switch over to that as the week progresses. It's weird. It feels like Sunday, but it's only Saturday. So we will be all over covering K-State at Tech, and we'll be there with our Zach Carlson and Ryan Gilbert. For Wally and Cole, I'm Fitz. We appreciate you listening to this GoPowercat Live as we just kind of try to sort things out. What the hell happened in Stillwater?
Thank you for listening to the Powercat Podcast. Make sure you're subscribing to our show at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you get your podcasts.
My 13-year-old acts like a puppy again. Almost overnight, she's a different dog.
Perfect poops. When people switch their dog's food to the farmer's dog, the effects can seem like magic. But there's no magic involved. It's simply real meat and vegetables with all the nutrients dogs need, instead of highly processed pellets. No tricks, just smarter, healthier pet food delivered in packs portioned for your dog. It's amazing what real food can do. Get 50% off your first order at thefarmersdog.com/NoMagic50.
Ready to ride?
I thought you'd never ask.
It's the untold story of the greatest American lawman.
I'm warning you, your wicked days are done.
Lawmen, Bass Reeves' new original series, now streaming exclusively on Paramount+.